At 6:30 in the morning on June 6, 1944, the greatest invasion in human history was already going wrong in ways few people on the beaches understood. The sea was rough, radios were failing, units were landing in the wrong places, and plans made over years were breaking apart in minutes. Somewhere in England, General George S. Patton was not even allowed to take part. He was officially sidelined, watching the most important day of the war unfold without him. Yet within weeks, Allied commanders would quietly realize a hard truth. If the invasion of Europe was going to survive its own mistakes, Patton would have to save it. And the reason traces back to a dangerous clash of strategy, pride, and delay that centered on Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. To understand why D-Day nearly slipped into disaster and why Patton became the man who stabilized it, we need to rewind months before the first landing craft hit the sand. By late 1943, the Allies had agreed that invading Western Europe was unavoidable. The Soviet Union was bleeding on the Eastern Front, and Joseph Stalin was demanding a second front. The question was not whether to invade France, but how. And at the centre of that question stood Montgomery, the British commander of ground forces for Operation Overlord. Montgomery was confident, careful, and deeply stubborn. He believed in overwhelming force, narrow fronts, and methodical advances. His experience in North Africa had shaped him. At El Alamein in October 1942, he had defeated Field Marshal Erwin Rommel by building up massive strength and then pushing slowly but steadily. That victory made Montgomery famous. It also convinced him that caution and control were the keys to winning wars. Speed, in his mind, was dangerous. Risk was unacceptable. When Montgomery reviewed the early D-Day plans in January 1944, he rejected them almost entirely. He insisted the invasion front be widened, more divisions added, and more time taken to prepare. On paper, his changes made sense. In reality, they locked the Allies into a rigid plan that depended on everything going exactly right. It assumed the Germans would react slowly. It assumed Allied units would land on schedule. It assumed command and control would hold under fire. War rarely respects such assumptions. The landings on June 6th showed how fragile the plan was. At Omaha Beach, the US 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions were nearly destroyed. German defences were stronger than expected. Tanks sank in the surf. Officers were killed in the first minutes. Entire companies were pinned down. By 9 a.m., senior commanders seriously considered evacuating the beach. This was not a small setback. If Omaha failed, the entire American sector could collapse, splitting the Allied front in half on the very first day. Further west, airborne drops before dawn had gone badly wrong. The US 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions were scattered across miles of countryside. Units landed in swamps, flooded fields, and enemy-held villages. Men fought in small groups with no idea where their objectives were. Yet these paratroopers improvised, blocked German roads, and caused enough confusion to slow counterattacks. They succeeded not because of the plan, but despite it. Montgomery's concept depended on the British and Canadians holding strong near Caen, drawing German armour toward them, while the Americans built up strength in the west and then broke out. This idea, often called the holding battle, sounded reasonable. But it underestimated two things. First, the speed at which German commanders could react. Second, the danger of allowing the Americans to remain bottled up for too long. By June 7th, German panzer divisions were already moving. The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and the Panzerlehr Division began attacking British and Canadian forces near Caen. Montgomery had promised to take Caen on D-Day. It did not happen. The city became a grinding battlefield that swallowed men and tanks. Day after day, British units attacked and stalled. The Germans held firm. The longer this went on, the more pressure built on the American sector. In the West, US forces advanced slowly through the Norman bocage. These hedgerows were thick earth banks topped with dense vegetation, some centuries old. They turned every field into a fortress. German infantry and anti-tank guns used them perfectly. Tanks could not push through easily. Visibility was limited. Attacks became close, brutal, and slow. Casualties mounted. Progress was measured in yards. This was not how the Americans expected to fight. More importantly, it was not how Montgomery's plan accounted for time. The longer the Allies remained stuck near the beaches, the more chance the Germans had to reinforce, dig in, and stabilize the front. The invasion was no longer a bold thrust. It was becoming a dangerous stalemate. By mid-June, the situation worried General Dwight D. Eisenhower deeply. As Supreme Allied Commander, he carried the full weight of responsibility. Publicly, he projected calm confidence. Privately, he saw the cracks. Supplies were piling up on the beaches. Ports were not yet captured. The artificial Mulberry Harbour at Omaha was destroyed by a storm on June 19th. One of the logistical pillars of Overlord was suddenly gone. If the Allies could not break out soon, the entire campaign could bog down into a war of attrition in the hedgerows. Montgomery remained confident. He insisted his strategy was working. He argued that German armour was being drawn east toward Caen, exactly as planned. In theory, this would leave the western flank weaker. In practice, the Americans were still facing fierce resistance. German units rotated, adapted, and fought skillfully. The longer the battle dragged on, the more expensive every mile became. This is where George S. Patton enters the story again, not on June 6th, but weeks later, when the Allies needed momentum more than caution. Patton was officially commanding the fictional 1st U.S. Army Group in southeast England, a deception force designed to convince the Germans that the real invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais. German intelligence believed Patton was the Allies' best offensive commander. As long as he stayed in England, they assumed the main attack had not yet happened. By late July, the deception had served its purpose. Eisenhower needed Patton in France. On August 1, 1944, the U.S. Third Army was activated and Patton took command. But even before that date, his influence was being felt. Operation Cobra, the American breakout plan, was approved on July 25th. It was designed to smash through German lines near Saint-Lô, using massive air power, and then unleash mobile forces into open country. Cobra was risky, very risky. Bombing runs could hit friendly troops. A narrow breakthrough could be counterattacked. Montgomery supported the operation, but did not fully grasp its urgency. He still believed in controlling the pace. Eisenhower, however, understood something Montgomery did not. Time was the enemy. The longer the Allies waited, the stronger the Germans became. When Cobra began, it was almost a disaster. On July 25th, American bombers accidentally hit U.S. positions, killing and wounding hundreds, including Lieutenant General Leslie J. McNair. The ground attack stalled. For a moment, it looked like another failed push, but American units regrouped. German defences, already stretched thin, began to crack. By July 27th, the breakthrough was real. This was the moment Patton had been waiting for his entire career. Once activated, Third Army moved with a speed and aggression that shocked both friend and foe. Patton believed in relentless offence. He believed in keeping the enemy off balance, attacking before they could react, and exploiting success immediately. Where Montgomery paused to consolidate, Patton pushed forward. Within days, Patton's forces were racing through Brittany, cutting off German units, capturing key towns, and forcing the enemy into retreat. German command structure in the West began to unravel. Hitler issued unrealistic orders to hold ground at all costs. Field commanders were trapped between impossible demands and a rapidly collapsing front. As Patton advanced, the contrast between his style and Montgomery's became impossible to ignore. Montgomery was still fighting costly battles around Caen, finally capturing the city on July 9th, but failing to break out decisively. Patton, meanwhile, turned a narrow gap into a flood. His armoured columns moved day and night. Fuel trucks followed closely. Recon units probed ahead constantly. The Germans could not form a stable line against him. The critical moment came in August with the Falaise pocket. The Germans were retreating east, but they were vulnerable. Patton's Third Army drove north toward Argenton. Canadian and Polish forces pushed south from Falaise. The opportunity was clear. If the Allies closed the gap, they could trap and destroy a large portion of the German army in Normandy. This is where Montgomery's caution returned with devastating effect. Concerned about overextension and friendly fire, he ordered Patton to halt at Argentan on August 13th. Patton was furious. He believed he could close the pocket and annihilate the enemy. He later wrote that this was one of the greatest missed opportunities of the war. The pocket was eventually closed, but too late. Tens of thousands of German troops escaped, many without heavy equipment, but still alive to fight again. The delay cost lives in later battles. It also reinforced a growing realization among American commanders. Montgomery's style, effective in set-piece battles, was dangerously slow in a war that now demanded speed. So why does this matter for D-Day itself? Because the invasion was never just about June 6th. It was about sustaining momentum. Montgomery's rigid planning and cautious execution nearly turned the landing into a static front, exactly what the Allies could not afford. Patton did not land on D-Day, but his arrival saved it from stagnation. By September 1944, Allied forces had liberated Paris, crossed much of France, and reached the German border. None of this was guaranteed in June. It became possible because the Allies finally shifted from careful control to aggressive exploitation. Patton embodied that shift. This does not mean Montgomery was incompetent. He was not. He was a skilled planner and a capable commander. But war is not won by caution alone. In Normandy, caution nearly cost the Allies their greatest chance. Patton's aggressive doctrine, often criticized as reckless, proved essential at the moment when the invasion needed life. Eisenhower understood this balance. He needed Montgomery's planning skills and Patton's speed. The tragedy was that these strengths often clashed instead of complementing each other. The personal rivalry, the national pride, and the different war experiences created friction at the worst possible time. On June 6, 1944, the Allies stood on a knife edge. The invasion could have failed, not because of German strength alone, but because of Allied hesitation. It survived because soldiers on the ground adapted, because commanders like Eisenhower made hard choices, and because when the moment came, Patton was unleashed. History often remembers D-Day as an inevitable success. It was not. It was fragile, uncertain, and close to disaster. The beaches were only the beginning. The real test came after, in the weeks of blood, mud, and hesitation. And it was in those weeks that Patton saved what Montgomery's caution almost lost. When the war ended in Europe on May 7, 1945, victory seemed complete and certain in hindsight. But those who had watched the Normandy campaign unfold knew the truth. Success came not from a perfect plan, but from breaking free of one that no longer worked. Patton understood that war rewards those who move faster than their mistakes. In Normandy, that understanding made all the difference. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.